For many of us, the television channel PBS brings up thoughts of sitting in front of the TV as a child, watching Sesame Street, or perhaps The Electric Company. Or maybe as we got older, taking in English comedies that were originally aired on the BBC. Or perhaps for many, it brings up iconic personalities such as the painter Bob Ross, Mr. Rogers, or Bill Nye, the science guy. For us Canadians, PBS has been something we have been lucky enough to get from television affiliates south of the border. One of the relatively new PBS personalities that is becoming an icon is the American violinist, conductor, producer, and explorer, Scott Yu. Scott Yu is the host and executive producer of PBS's Now Hear This, a television program that is presented by PBS's Great Performances. This month of April brings us the fourth season of Now Hear This. In this season, Yu explores the music of composers Astor Piazzolla, Robert Schumann, Ivek Abaneth, and the young New York-based steel drum virtuoso and composer Andy Akiho. And joining me here over Zoom to talk about the 4 episodes that make up this season of Now Hear This, I am joined by the one and only Scott Yu. Hey, Scott, it's great to meet you here over Zoom.
Well, and I'm talking with the one and only Chris Wolf. That was the most elegantly read preamble I've experienced in my many years being on the radio. So thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for that. It actually wasn't that long ago that you were here in our Classic 107 studios. You were here in November performing with your wife, Alice Dade, as part of the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra's concert season. So yeah, it's nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, that's a great studio, and it's a great neighborhood.
Thank you. I got a sneak peek at all 4 episodes from this season's Now Hear This from my friends at Crossover Media. It is really, really great. It's part musical exploration, part travel guide, part history lesson, and part food magazine. I got to ask the question, how did you not gain a ton of weight during the creation of this season? I gained 5 extra pounds just by looking at the steak that you ate in Buenos Aires. You traveled to a number of really wonderful places and eat some great food throughout the season, throughout the series. Did you find the traveling at all grueling while you were making the season?
The travel can sometimes be really pleasurable, and as you say, yes, it can also be very grueling. It really depends. When we went to Argentina, to Buenos Aires, we checked into a hotel and we never left that hotel, and so it was actually very easy. Everything was very, Buenos Aires is a huge city but also small, so getting to the filming locations was relatively easy. When we went to Albanies, to Spain, the whole premise of that episode is that we follow Albanese as he travels from city to city to city to city to city, and writes a different composition in each city. And for that, we weren't in any city for more than a day, and so that was really grueling and difficult. So it all depends.
So the composers in this season are Piazzolla, Schumann, Albanese, and Andy Akiho. Can you talk about how the season came together, and how did you discover Andy Akiho and his music? His music is fantastic. How did the season come together?
I totally agree with you. Andy Akiho was actually a composer that we were going to profile in season 3. And what happened was, because we were going to do an episode on 4 American composers who were immigrants, Sergio Assad, Rina Ismail, Andy Akiho, and one other. And as we were filming them, we realized that doing a quarter of an episode for Sergio Assad or for Rina Ismail, there was just too much good material, and a quarter of an episode wasn't enough. So we thought, okay, we'll give each one of them a half an episode. And then they were editing together Andy Akiho, and again we thought, boy, we have so much great material. A half an episode is not quite enough. So what we decided to do was we went back to Andy Akiho and we shot a few more scenes and made it its own episode. The Schumann episode happened because We were still at the end of COVID, believe it or not. And so when we shot Schumann, we lost one of our dear camera people. She got COVID 2 days before the shoot. And when we were shooting with the Royal Scottish National Orchestra, there were all kinds of COVID restrictions in place. It was pretty scary. So we were kind of doing catch as catch can and trying to shoot whatever we could.
Right.
Um, Piazzolla, we were kind of under the gun for time, and we decided, let's shoot in South America because the light is so gorgeous there. Who could we
Hmm.
shoot? And we'd been talking for years about doing a Piazzolla episode, and bam, it just everything came into place, and we just did
Hmm.
that. Albanese, I can't pronounce it as well as you can,
Sure.
but Chris, but Albanese was something that we'd wanted to do for a long time.
Hmm.
Albanese was if there is a now hear this composer, it's Isaac Albanese. He was a Spaniard who would just travel from location to location to location. He would go to Sevilla and he'd get settled, and then he would sit down and write a piece, and he would call it Sevilla. Then he would go to Cadiz, and he would absorb the culture of Cadiz, and eat its food and drink its wines, and then he would write a piece, and he call it Cadiz, and he just go on and on. Granada, Cordoba, and so we thought, okay, let's do the same thing. And so if there ever was a now hear this composer, Albanese is it. And
Hmm.
plus, who doesn't want to go to Spain?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I want to just talk about the show that you shot in Buenos Aires. It's not only about Piazzolla. It's one of the things I really love about the program. It's not just about the music. You talk about how bandoneons are made, how they're played. You yourself performed with tango bands, and you even learned to dance some basic tango steps. Uh, for you in Buenos Aires, was there any one thing that pops out in your mind right now as the most memorable thing that happened to you while you and your wife were there?
I think that my wife and I would have different answers.
Huh.
Uh, you know, uh, I think your point is a very good one, Chris. Now, hear this. We want to provide as many points of entry into the art form of art music, of classical music as we possibly can. And we know that for some people, classical music is a reach, but somebody might like dance, somebody might like wine, somebody might like cuisine, you know, architecture, what have you. We try to put as many points of entry into the art form as we can, and so we kind of model the show after what Anthony Bourdain did. I'm, of course, a pale substitute for Anthony Bourdain, but I do have one advantage over him, which is that music is transmissible over television, whereas food really is not. You can
Yeah, right.
see it, but you can't taste it. For me, definitely the steak was the memorable moment because I love steak, but I had never had anything like that.
It was
That was
huge.
outrageous. I mean, it really tasted like a mix of eating steak and if people watch the show, it tastes like eating steak, but also eating foie gras at the same time. It was crazy. I know that for Alice, I think her highlight was to see those world class. I mean, some people told me these are the best people in the world for this. Tango dancers, but not on TV, but like 3 feet away, and I hope that the film captured that. It's so easy for them. It's so natural for them that it's all second nature for them, and you just can't help but admire that these people have put their entire lives into doing what they do at the best of human ability, and it's staggering.
Absolutely. I just have one question. You played a lot with tango musicians. Was it any different performing with musicians who grew up playing tango as opposed to if you're playing perhaps with some classically trained musicians who are playing piazzolla? What was that feeling like for you?
Oh, that's an excellent question. That's a really excellent question. They do it better than classical
Hmm.
people because they have techniques that classical players simply do not have. Especially, there's one, we show it on the film, just playing incredibly short. Now,
Yeah.
I feel like I can play a note really short on my violin. I mean, I can play it quite short, but what they do is 5 times shorter than anything that I tried.
Mhm.
But what they are able to do, it's almost like they're lifting the bow off the with the bow with sorry, they're lifting the string with the bow, whereas I'm hitting the string with the bow. They're almost
Yeah.
lifting it. I don't know how they do it. I think it would take years of work, but they are just stunningly good at it.
Mhm. I want to turn to the second episode, which is called Schumann, Genius and Madness. Here you explore the effect of mental illness on creativity. But again, the episode is not just about Schumann. You talk about Vincent van Gogh and Robbie Burns. Without giving away too much, can you talk about some of the arguments that your guests in the episode made about bipolar disorder and the effect that it has on creativity?
Sure. You know, in 1842, Schumann wrote nearly all of his chamber music. So he was just 32 years old. He was a kid.
Mm,
But anything that you love of Schumann's chamber music, he basically wrote in that year. And he did it really fast. Um, and a lot of people point to that as a bout of mania, that he was just in this sort of hyper energetic aroused state where he just ideas were coming through his pen. He wrote once that something to the effect of my pen doesn't write fast enough because I'm just there's so many things coming through.
mm,
Robert Burns, as you just mentioned, he had a similar episode in writing, and Van Gogh towards the end of his life he had similarly productive episodes. And I think it's something that we explore. Is it a prerequisite in to be a one of a kind artist? Is it a prerequisite to have some kind of mental health disorder? And I'm not sure if you can definitively say one way or another, but certainly the output of those three giants would have been completely different had not had bouts of mental illness.
yeah,
And I knew about Schumann because I was a music student. I
right.
did not know about Robert Burns, and I didn't really know about Van Gogh. I knew that he obviously had some issues, but I didn't know about the manic depressive side. And it is really interesting, especially to talk to people who are experts at
Right.
Van Gogh or experts at Robert Burns.
Yeah, totally. Um, as I said earlier, Andy Akiho's music is fantastic. It has elements of jazz, it has elements of minimalism, and there's some music of John Cage influence. I'm thinking in particular the prepared piano stuff that's in the episode. What were you most surprised when you were spending time with him? What was the most surprising thing for you when you were working with Andy Akiho?
What an excellent question. That's a very simple answer. I was surprised because I'd heard his music, and it's wild and colorful and energetic and bristling with energy. And I was surprised by how quiet he is and
Yeah,
how self-effacing he is. And the art and the artist in Andy Akiho's case are completely different. Um, One of the things that is interesting about Andy's art, and I'm just not going to call it music yet, because once he writes the music, that's only the halfway point for Andy. So
yeah,
at that point, he starts working with dancers or
right.
choreographers or cartoonists, and he develops these videos that are almost they're 49% of the art for Andy Akiho. And you know, I had never met anybody like that. I knew a lot of people. We probably have 150 friends in common. And I knew a lot of people who had commissioned him and
Hmm.
had worked with him and said, oh, he's a really nice guy.
Hmm.
But somebody like him who takes what he writes and then almost gives it away and says, okay, now create something to this music. I find that to be really interesting. And composers are often portrayed as very lonely figures. They just lock themselves in a room with a piano and they write. And I think that's actually largely true. But in Andy's case, it's not, because so much of what he does is collaborative. He's either collaborating with the other performers or he's collaborating with people sort of post composition. So I don't know. It was a really interesting journey to just get to know Andy. He's a fascinating character.
Yeah, there was that one piece you ran on the rehearsals for, where it was his percussion ensemble, but then there were also dancers, and they also incorporated lights. And as soon as the lights element popped in, I couldn't help but think of Scriabin. Because that's what
Wow.
Scriabin wanted to do towards the end of his life, right? This idea of the Gesamtkunstwerk, the total work. And it was one of the things that I found so fascinating about Andy Keogh and his music. It was just a great episode.
Well,
Mhm.
it was, he kind of wants you to be immersed in sensation.
Yeah,
Um, of course, he's not dealing with taste or with touch, but what he can deliver to you is light and sound. And those dancers were, I mean, without, I guess I'm not really giving anything away. I mean, they did things with their body that I didn't know humans. They must all be triple or quadruple jointed or something. I mean, to move like that is so crazy.
yeah.
And I don't know. That was fascinating to be standing right next to these people who could move their bodies like that. That was something
Mhm.
else.
I want to just quickly talk about the last episode. The last episode is about Isaac Abanev. But again, it's not just about the composer. There's a portion of the episode that's about art and architecture, and in particular, the influence of Muslim Andalusia and the Moors on Spain. Can you talk about that a bit and how that works into the music element of the show?
Well, it's interesting because I was not I must confess I was not an expert on Iberian history when I started filming this episode. But what you learn is that, and I hope that we convey this well in the film. Um, control of those regions in Andalusia sort of kept going back and forth between the Christians and the Moors, and the Christians and the Moors, and what remains today is almost the best of both.
All right.
And when I went to the Alhambra, it is something that is so jaw dropping. I recommend that anyone listening in Winnipeg, if you have a spare vacation coming up, Spain is actually very inexpensive once you get there, and the Alhambra is just it just really defies belief that this could be created. I don't know how you could create something like this without power
Mhm.
tools. How is that possible?
Right.
It is so immense, and everything is planned, and it is so gorgeous, and it's just acres and acres and acres and acres. That was life changing, just being there.
Mhm. And then, of course, to top it all off for that episode, you get to walk around with Manuel Borrego, who is one of my favorite guitarists. I've been a fan of his ever since he put out the CD covering the Beatles stuff. What was it? What was it like working with him and hearing him play the music of Albaneth constantly
Well,
throughout the episode?
he's another one of those. He's obviously a giant in the guitar world, but when you're sitting next to him, he could be anybody that you meet on a bus.
Yeah.
Really, he's so unassuming and so gentle, and such a sort of humble man. He's very funny, and he just really, he's really not in it for himself. He's really in it for the music, and I just admire him a lot. I'm a huge fan of his, just like you.
Yeah, beautiful guitarist. Scott, the season is so engaging and so interesting. Now, Hear This airs on Fridays throughout this month of April. Thankfully, we live in an age of streaming. So, if people have missed episodes, is there a place on the PBS website where they can go and stream back episodes of Now Hear This?
Absolutely. PBS.org. If you get what's they're called their passport, you can watch Now Hear This, and I think it's free for the first month, and then after that, you hit the paywall. However, the paywall is only $5 a month, so it's pretty compared to Netflix. It's only a
Yeah,
quarter of what I pay for Netflix, so it's
and
pretty good.
well worth the money. All four shows are
Totally worth
just
it. There's so much in
yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Totally worth it.
absolutely. Absolutely. Scott, congratulations on the fourth season of Now Hear This. It is a really, really fantastic series. And thanks for taking the time to talk to me today. And hopefully, the next time I see you, we'll be here in Winnipeg conducting our Manitoba Chamber Orchestra again. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely, Chris. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.